In my opinion, the problem in Israel-Palestine is not Zionism. If all 13 million people between the river and the sea were Zionists, or if all 13 million people were anti-Zionists, you'd still have 90% of people in Gaza without safe drinking water and 5.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank who don't have the right to vote. You'd still have what the world's leading human rights organization, Human Rights Watch, recently called Jewish domination or Jewish supremacy, i.e. apartheid. So I'm against all ideologies that believe that ethnic or religious or linguistic or political groups have inherent or innate self-determination rights. I'm against all political movements, all political ideologies that hold that states ought to serve the interest of a single religious, ethnic, or linguistic group. I support political movements and political ideologies that include all religious, all linguistic, all ethnic groups. And so I guess that already makes me an anti-Zionist, because Zionism is all about Jewish self-determination and Jewish control. And so I'm an anti-Zionist for the same reason I'm against the Hutu power movement in Rwanda, or the Communist Party in China, or the white nationalists in the US, or the National Rally movement in France, or Sunni domination over Shia in Bahrain, or the domination of Arab nationalists in Sudan, or of the Alawite supremacy in Syria. Or, of course, we can stick with Israel-Palestine itself, the Palestinian Islamist ideology in Gaza. All of these political ideologies, all these political movements hold that states should act as vehicles for the interests of a single group. And I think that has disastrous consequences wherever and whenever people believe that. I think Arabs and Nubians should have the same rights in Sudan. I think Hutus and Tutsis should have the same political rights in Rwanda. Whites and blacks should have the same political rights in the United States. Jews and Palestinians should have the same rights in Israel and Palestine. You might try and say that Jewish self-determination doesn't necessarily entail Jewish domination. But let me ask you this. Why did soldiers of the state of Israel in the first few years after statehood shoot at Palestinian refugees trying to return to their homes in 1949, in 1950, in 1951, and in 1952? You had 10 to 15,000 Palestinians who were recently made refugees by a war trying to return to their home every year for the first 6-7 years after the establishment of the state of Israel. And Israel shot at them when they were trying to return. Why is that? Would Israel have shot at them if they were Jewish? I mean, suppose they were Jewish. Suppose there were Jewish refugees fleeing Europe after World War II. Would Israel have shot live ammunition at them as they tried to enter the country? No, of course not. It's not even a counterfactual question. They did try to enter the country, and they were welcome. They were given free housing and a passport. I think whenever you have a state that is set up to serve the interests of just a single ethnic, linguistic, religious group, other groups necessarily get discriminated against. In some cases, they're not allowed to bring their spouse into the country, or they're not allowed to buy land from the JNF, or they're not allowed to move into an apartment, or they're not allowed to move into a building, or they're not allowed to move into one of 900 towns in Israel that exclude non-Jews, or they're discriminated against at the airport or targeted by the police, or they face excessive violence at protests. None of these things are coincidences. They all stem from the underlying problem of the state, which is that it was set up to serve the interests of Jews above all else.